We're going to be talking about shotguns and youth hunting. And we've got 3 boys that hunt with us. Simeon, who is 13, Nevin, who's 12, going to be turning 13, and then Elijah, who is 11. And we've been taking them out, and we've got 3 different shotguns that the boys use, and that has kind of brought up some discussion on our youth hunting videos recently. I had a comment from Tyler Bassine. He said, 410, when I was their age, I used to cut down 12 gauge with 3.5-inch Magnum shells, and I was their size. And then Adam Dunham said, me personally, I would suggest a 20 for them. It has more range and a bigger pattern. Well, the shotguns that we've been using with the boys have been kind of a progression over time that we're going to talk about. My personal philosophy, and you can jump in whenever you want, but my personal philosophy with taking kids hunting is, number one, they have to enjoy the experience. So if they're afraid of a 12 gauge, I'm not going to try to force it on them. If they're afraid of a 20 gauge, I'm not going to try to force them. You want them to enjoy their experience when they go out there, because if they don't, then they're not going to want to go back. And what you're trying to do is build a future hunting partner even.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the kids have to be comfortable with what they're using.
Yeah.
I know when I was in my 20s, I did some hunting, and a friend brought along his little brother who was an 8th grader, and he was about 4'11", and he was shooting a 12 gauge. And every time he pulled, it didn't bother him. I mean, he was fully happy to shoot that, but it would knock him back about 3 feet every time he would pull the trigger.
Yeah. I think that's going to vary from kid to kid. Some kids will take that thump on the shoulder and not care. Others are a little more fearful about it. About 3 years ago, Nevin, who is 12, almost turning 13, he went out on a teal hunt, and you had purchased for him that 20 gauge single shot hammerless.
Yeah.
And we call it the mule gun because that 20 gauge kicks like a mule.
Yeah.
What makes the difference?
Well, the double barrels or single shots that just crack open and then crack back closed, they're much tighter guns. So all of the kickback is transmitted backwards. It's just into your shoulder. Whereas on the other extreme, if you take an automatic, when it fires that shell, the cylinder comes back and grabs the next shell and pushes it forward. And so there's very little kick on an automatic, even if it's 12 gauge.
I don't know if this is true or not, but to me it feels like that 20 gauge single shot has more kick to it than my Outlander semi-automatic. So we took Nevin out west on the hunt where he shot his first duck. He shot a green wing teal about 3 years ago. And the night before, we went outside the camper because I wanted him to just pull the trigger on this gun before we went hunting. And he was a little nervous about it, and he pulled the trigger, and that gun rocked him back so far, I think it knocked his hat off, if I remember right. I remember his head shot clear back, and I was all worried about it. And he looked up and he said, "That was awesome!" And he was thrilled with it. But that really shook him. But the next day he took it out. He shot that gun probably 20, 25 times over the weekend, and it was no problem for him.
But then the next year, before the season, we took the 3 boys out and we're having them practice in the yard. And he was actually afraid of that gun. He shot it, but it was scary.
So the following year, after Nevin shot his first duck, I was wanting to get all 3 boys ready for duck hunting, and I thought, well, they just need to shoot this gun a little bit, go over some safety tips with them, and just have them get a little familiar with it. And something about all 3 of them being together, by the time we were done, 2 of them were literally in tears crying.
Yeah.
About the fear of the gun and even the kick that they felt.
Nevin was feeling like he was somehow failing.
Yeah.
And whereas the oldest one was okay with it, the youngest one didn't want to shoot it at all.
Yeah.
And Nevin was in between, and he shot it, but he felt like it was kicking him so bad he just felt like a failure.
So what I had thought was going to be a really positive experience with taking our boys out and just getting them more familiar with the gun ended up being a really negative experience where they were deathly afraid of this 20 gauge.
Right. We were actually shooting 3-inch shells out of that 20, which I don't know what the powder load was, but it was probably almost as much as my 12 gauge, only in a much tighter gun.
So after the disaster experience of them shooting that 20 gauge, they were for some reason also fearful of it, that either we were going to rush out and get them that 410, or they weren't going to go duck hunting that year.
Right. At this point, they could probably all shoot to 20.
Yeah.
But initially, it was a chance to get them into shooting and learning how to handle a gun and hopefully shoot a duck, because you can kill ducks with the 410.
Yeah.
But it's just more difficult because of the small pattern.
And by the end of the year, all three of them were comfortable shooting the 20 gauge again. At least we went to the over and under Browning Satori, and by the end of the year, they all wanted to shoot that gun. And going into this next duck season, none of them even want to shoot the 410. In fact, they're starting to talk about the 12 gauge.
Yeah, and we probably ought to think about selling the 410 and transferring it into a 12.
Yeah.
The thing on a gun is not only how much it kicks, but its length and its weight.
Yeah. But anyway, this year we've got we will still take the 410, just because I don't think any of them are quite ready for the 12. So we're going to have to, if they all want to hunt at the same time, which we take them out. We've got youth hunt weekend, and we go out and do a big camping trip, which I'll put links to those videos here. Had a whole weekend. Simeon didn't go because he broke his ankle, but Elijah and Nevin went, and so we're going to do that again this year. And then we'll probably take each of them at least one more time throughout the year. And Tyler, if you were shooting a 12 gauge at the age of 12 with 3.5-inch shells, I just gotta say he's a stud. He's a lot tougher than our kids, so you definitely are tougher than them. If
he's like that little 4'11" 8th grader that was shooting a 12 gauge, and it was just wailing the tar out of him, but he was having fun.
Until next time, thanks for all the comments. If you haven't subscribed, do that.